Welcome back everyone and Happy New Year. This is the 5th installment of the Community Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg, where we cover a bunch of different topics submitted by you guys. Check out the link in the description if you'd like to submit your own mystery, and stick around until the end to see how the iceberg is currently looking. Now, without further ado, let's begin. 19-year-old Charles mccullar was an aspiring photographer who went on a trip in 1974 that would change his life. He left his van in Virginia and traveled to Oregon by hitchhiking and taking buses. After staying with a friend, he went to Crater Lake National Park in January 1975 to take pictures of winter. Charles planned to be back at his friend's place in 2 days, but he never showed up. People around Diamond Lake, which was not far from Crater Lake, said they saw him before he went missing. Even though there was a lot of snow, Charles wanted to walk along the North Road at Crater Lake. A number of skiers said that the snow was extremely soft and it reached all the way up to their waist. When Charles didn't return on February 1st, the police in Eugene were contacted. The Oregon State Police put up posters in bus stations hoping to find Charles and make sure he was okay. At this point, a number of rumors began to spread, suggesting that Charles may have went somewhere else. The police thought that perhaps Charles might have changed his hiking plans without telling anyone. The investigation into Charles' disappearance didn't turn up any useful information at first. In a letter dated March 15, 1976, sent to then Senator William L. Scott, a family member of Charles expressed frustration that the FBI wasn't helpful. The letter mentioned that the FBI claimed it couldn't get involved in missing persons cases unless there was evidence of kidnapping. Even after searching by air and on the ground for months, there were no signs of Charles. The person who wrote the letter said, "After looking at the police reports we have and maps of the searched areas, and considering how hard they looked without finding any signs of Charles or his things, we think he didn't just get caught in bad weather, but might have been a victim of foul play." A year later, on October 13th, 1976, 2 hikers from Texas got lost while traveling through Crater Lake Park. They ended up in a remote part called the Sphagnum Bog area in a little empty canyon. When they arrived, the hikers discovered an old, dirty backpack in the bog. They called the park rangers, and a day later, the rangers searched the area and found the remains of Charles, scattered along Bybee Creek, 12 miles away from where he started his hike. In the backpack, they found the key to Charles's vehicle, which he had left in Virginia. The FBI was called in to finish the investigation as well. Broken off shin bones were found sticking up in his pants. Foot bones were discovered in his socks, but most of his skeleton seemed to be missing, except for the top of his skull, which was found 12 feet away. Charles's camera gear, shirt, boots, and coat were all gone as well. It's believed that Charles might have been experiencing hypothermia. In some cases, people with hypothermia feel very hot and end up taking off their clothes, even though they are actually freezing. This reaction is known as paradoxical undressing. Now, there are many theories about what had happened. How did Charles manage to travel 12 miles from where he started? On the day he went missing, there was 7 feet of snow on the ground, making it seem impossible for Charles to cover such a distance without skis or snowshoes. Some people find it hard to believe that even a snowmobile could make it through 2.6 meters of powdery snow, let alone a person. In 2016, Stephen mccullar wrote an article about his missing brother. He came up with an interesting theory. If only those broken off shin bones could have talked to us, what do you think they'd say? I bet they'd say something like this: "I hitched a ride with this creepy guy who stole my camera equipment and money and shot me in the head. Then on a clear day in the dead of winter, he took my body to the remotest part of Crater Lake, removed my shirt and boots, set me up on a log, and left, thinking that the animals would destroy the evidence by spring. And hey, I guess it worked because the cops ruled my death to be from natural causes. My dad doesn't buy it though." Shergar, a beloved racehorse valued at over $15 million, was kidnapped from his stable in Kildare by a group of masked individuals armed with guns. Despite their attempts to ask for money in exchange for Shergar's return, the gentle horse sadly met a tragic end and they never found his body. Shergar became famous as the most renowned and valuable racehorse worldwide. He had a remarkable win in the 1981 Epsom Derby, breaking a record with a huge 10-length victory, the biggest in the race's 202-year history. After that, he won 4 major races and was given the prestigious title of European Horse of the Year. After Shergar retired from racing, horse owners eagerly paid substantial amounts of money, up to $120,000, to have foals from him. They wanted to train these young horses for future races because Shergar had an impressive racing record. On the chilly night of February 8th, 1983, Shergar was kidnapped by a group of men wearing masks believed to be linked to the IRA. After a successful first racing season, Shergar was syndicated for $15 million among 34 people, with each share valued at around $382,000. A billionaire spiritual leader known as the Aga Khan retained 6 of these shares. On the night that Shergar was kidnapped, he was getting ready for his second season as a breeding stallion. Around 8 p.m., Jim Fitzgerald's son, the head groom who lived at the stud, heard a knock at the door. When he opened it, he found 2 masked men with guns, and one of them said, "We have come for Shergar. We want $3 million for him." Jim Fitzgerald, a father of 6, was threatened at gunpoint to take the kidnappers to Shergar's stable. There, 6 more gunmen wearing masks joined them. They loaded Shergar into a horse box brought by the men, and Fitzgerald was then forced into their car with guns still pointed at him. The investigation posed a significant challenge for authorities because the kidnappers picked the day just before Ireland's Major Goff's racehorse sale to snatch Shergar. This timing meant that numerous horse boxes were traveling on roads throughout Ireland, making it tough to identify Shergar among them. I can still vividly recall that night in the car with those lads. Numerous thoughts raced through my mind about what they might do to me. One of them, armed with a revolver, was particularly aggressive. That's what Fitzgerald had to say regarding the kidnappers. After being driven for around 3 hours, the kidnappers left Fitzgerald alone. He eventually found a telephone and called his brother, setting off a chain of calls among Shergar's shareholders, his vet, racing associates, and several Irish ministers. This process has been criticized as a quote-unquote caricature of police bungling because the actual police were not alerted until 8 hours after Shergar was taken, and by then, the kidnappers had long departed from the area. Using coded phrases, the kidnappers initiated talks with a representative of the Aga Khan over the phone. They were careful to end the call before 90 seconds elapsed to prevent authorities from tracing their location. A collective decision was made not to pay the ransom. The concern was that if they did, it would put every other racehorse in the world at risk, especially since many of them were valued at over £1 million, and Ireland lacked sufficient security measures as well. The search for Shergar turned into a massive media frenzy, with people in the UK and Ireland determined to bring him back. The Dublin police even offered a reward of over $150,000 for his safe return. The kidnappers agreed to negotiate with Derek Thompson, a man associated with ITV's racing team, who flew to Belfast to engage in talks at the Europa Hotel. He described the scene that awaited him at the Belfast airport as surreal. He said, "It felt like being a film star. Cameras were everywhere." Around 100 cameramen and journalists surrounded the Europa Hotel as Thompson and his fellow negotiators arrived. However, an agreement was never reached. The following day, Thompson received a phone call from the kidnappers who conveyed the grim news. They said, "The horse has had an accident. He's dead." They promptly ended the call after those words. Various theories circulated regarding Shergar's fate. One of them suggests that the horse might have had an accident during a fit of frenzy, and the individuals responsible for his kidnapping killed him due to their inability to manage his agitated state. Kevin Mallon, a prominent IRA leader, was believed to be a possible suspect behind the crime. A convicted killer from Tyrone, Kevin Mallon achieved notoriety for his escape from prison and being acquitted for the murder of a police officer. According to several reliable sources, it is almost certain that the 2 handlers, one wielding a machine gun, entered the secluded stable where Shergar was held and opened fire. A former IRA member disclosed to the Sunday Telegraph, "Shergar was machine gunned to death. The blood was everywhere and the horse even slipped on his own blood. There was lots of cussing and swearing because the horse wouldn't die. It was a very bloody death. It took several minutes before Shergar bled out." There is a common belief that Sugar's kidnappers buried him in a bog in Leitrim, while some speculate that they disposed of him into the sea off Ireland's south coast. Walter Swinburne, Sugar's former jockey who rode him in his renowned race, expressed distress over these discoveries, stating, "No horse deserves an ending like that, let alone one as special as Sugar." Despite extensive searches, Sugar's body was never located, and the case continues to be shrouded in mystery. And of course, the IRA has never officially claimed responsibility for the abduction of this horse. In Hexham, England, there was the Pollock family, which consisted of Florence and John Pollock and their two daughters, Joanna and Jacqueline, both of whom were 11 and 6 years old. In May of 1957, a tragic event occurred. The two sisters and their 9-year-old friend Anthony were walking to church when a careless driver hit them. The sisters passed away almost immediately, and Anthony died on the way to the hospital. The person who caused the accident was on a number of substances and later admitted to purposefully hitting the children because she had to give up her own kids. She was then put in a psychiatric hospital. And obviously, Florence and John were devastated by the loss of their children. A year after this loss, Florence became pregnant. John strongly believed that their daughters would be reborn as twins and they would have their little girls back. However, there was some disagreement with this idea. The two were devoted Catholics and had argued about the concept of reincarnation before, to the point where their marriage was at risk. Moreover, there was no history of twins in either of their families, and even her doctor said it was unlikely for her to have twins. But despite all of this, in October 1958, the couple was blessed with the birth of twin girls named Jennifer and Gillian. For several years, Florence resisted the idea that the twins were the reincarnated spirits of her two lost daughters, but there are a number of details that make many people believe that this is indeed true. Jennifer had a birthmark on her hip identical to the one that Jacqueline had, but the birthmarks between the twins were different, which is supposedly uncommon for twins. The family moved away from Hexham when the twins were very young, but as they grew older, they would recall details about Hexham even though they had never been there. Adding to this, the twins could identify their late sister's toys by their exact names, even though Florence had them stored away. They asked for each toy by name, played with them in the same way their previous sisters did, and even knew where the toys came from. Considering all of this, along with the fact that their personalities closely matched their late sisters in many ways, a lot of people are convinced that they are reincarnations. But Florence was still skeptical until the twins began talking about the car accident. It was only then where she began to reconsider her beliefs. One day, she overheard the twins playing a game where they were reenacting the accident. They could point to specific parts of the body that were hurt and bleeding. For instance, Gillian said to Jennifer, "The blood coming out of your eyes, that's where the car hit you," as Jennifer held her head on her lap. Additionally, the twins developed a significant fear of cars, and when they were younger, they frequently had frightening dreams about being hit by them. Around the age of 5, the memories of their past lives began to fade for the twins. However, Gillian later experienced a few visions related to a sandpit at a home in Wickham. Surprisingly, she accurately described the house and its surroundings even though she had never been to it before. It was a house where Florence had lived when she was younger. Now, some people speculate that the twins' siblings might have told them stories about their sister's past, but to my knowledge, I don't think they ever came out and admitted to this. But even if they had only heard about their past, it still doesn't really explain the mystery of their birthmarks, their personalities, their fear of cars, and other peculiar aspects of them. It will be impossible to ever know if these sisters were really reincarnations, but those that believe in more supernatural forces can't help but believe that this is not simply a coincidence. In 1981, actress Natalie Wood drowned off Catalina Island. Authorities initially considered it an accident, believing the 43-year-old star of West Side Story, who couldn't swim, had been drinking the night before she was found floating face down in the ocean. Over the years, her death has remained a Hollywood mystery, sparking speculation, TV specials, and books exploring the possibility of foul play. In 2011, 30 years after Wood's death, Los Angeles County Sheriff's officials reopened the investigation. Then, in 2013, county coroner's officials changed the cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. The new coroner's report pointed to fresh bruises on Wood's arms and knees, along with a scratch on her neck and a scrape on her forehead, suggesting the possibility of an assault before her drowning. The updated report also highlighted conflicting statements regarding the timing of Natalie Wood's disappearance and whether she had argued with her husband, actor Robert Wagner, and Christopher Walken, her co-star in the film Brainstorm. They were all on the 60-foot yacht where she was last seen alive on November 28, 1981. On the night of her death, the three actors had dinner at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant in Two Harbors and returned to the yacht afterwards. When they arrived back at the yacht, they started drinking and an argument unfolded between Walken and Wagner. According to the new report, Natalie Wood went missing around midnight and an examination of her stomach contents indicated her death occurred around that time. Wagner reported her missing with a radio call at 1:30 a.m. Roger Smith, the captain of the LA County rescue boat involved in retrieving Natalie Wood's body, stated that he didn't receive a call to search for her until after 5 a.m. Initially, investigators believed Wood's body was bruised from falling off the yacht and struggling to get into a rubber dinghy. The dinghy had scratch marks consistent with the hypothesized scenario. However, in the 2013 report, it was highlighted that they did not collect nail clippings from Wood's body to determine if she made the scratch marks, and the dinghy was no longer available for examination. The coroner's belief is that Wood died shortly after entering the water. Following the reopening of the investigation, over 100 individuals reached out to authorities, but it became evident that the new probe did not yield a significant breakthrough in the case. One Friday in April 1994 at Sunset Cliffs in San Diego, California, two surfers saw an unidentifiable mass wash up on the sand. When they looked closer, they found the naked body of 25-year-old Michelle Von Emster lying face down on a bed of kelp. They decided to move her remains to a nearby lifeguard headquarters. The first check by the medical examiner revealed large torn pieces of flesh and a missing right leg. The usual thought in such a situation might be a shark attack, but this case is not as simple as it seems. After a formal autopsy was conducted, this is what the medical examiner had to say. They believe that Michelle was last seen alive at 8 p.m., got into the water around 12 a.m., and shortly after, she was attacked by a great white shark. Obviously, Michelle couldn't effectively fight against a shark, so it dragged her down to the ocean floor where she broke her neck and ingested an excessive amount of sand and rocks. Michelle eventually died of blood loss and drowning. To most, this may seem like an exceptionally reasonable conclusion, however, there is some disagreement. Despite all the signs that might suggest a shark attack, the coroner at the lifeguard headquarters couldn't determine the cause of death, marking it as unknown. The following day, on April 16, 1994, an official autopsy was conducted by the San Diego Medical Examiner's office. Along with the torn flesh and missing leg, the victim had other injuries: a broken neck, broken ribs, scrapes, bruises, and contusions on the face. There was also a significant amount of sand in her throat, lungs, and stomach. There are a couple problems that make experts question the official conclusion that Michelle was killed by a shark, starting with concerns about the medical examiner. Here are a number of details that Brian Blackburn, the San Diego medical examiner handling the case, shared. When he examined Michelle's body, he had never dealt with a shark attack victim before. In fact, nobody who looked at the body had any experience with shark attack victims. To his credit, Blackburn did reach out to experts at the nearby Scripps Institute of Oceanography to learn more about shark attack victims. Ralph Collier, a shark expert with 54 years of experience, had the following to say after he took a look at Michelle's leg bone. When a great white shark bites off part of a limb, it usually makes a clean break, like a cut from a table saw. But Michelle's femur, what was left of it, didn't look like that. It looked more like when you take a piece of bamboo and whittle it down to a point with a knife. I've seen almost 100 photos of cases I've looked at over the years, and I've never seen bones that come to a point. The injury would have cut her femoral artery, and she would have bled to death quickly. But for her to have sand in her stomach, she would have had to take a big breath as she touched the sand. There are too many things in this case that don't match how white sharks usually behave. Another expert named Richard Rosenblatt added the following. None of the marks on Michelle's body were caused by a white shark. If she had been bitten by a white shark, they probably would have found a piece of the shark's tooth in her body. If a shark had taken her leg, it could have only been a white shark. So we know that there were no teeth from a great white shark found in Michelle's body, indicated that they had indeed fed on Michelle's body. A pathologist determined that there was no evidence suggesting that these bites occurred before Michelle's death. After 14 years, the case of Michelle von Emster was re-examined in 2008 due to conflicting evidence. This time, medical examiner Glenn Wagner concluded that sharks had scavenged Michelle's body after she died. So if we take a step back and look at everything that has been said by the experts, we get a bit of a better idea of the case. They stated that only a great white could have taken Michelle's leg. But the experts seem to agree that Michelle was not attacked by a great white, so that would mean that most likely Michelle did not die as a result of a shark. Of course, there are many theories regarding this case, one of which says that Michelle von Emster supposedly went for a midnight swim, got caught in a riptide, and her body was banged against rocks, causing most of her injuries. Later, sharks fed on her body in the ocean. However, this theory, especially the idea that Michelle went for a midnight swim, seems unlikely for several reasons. The water temperature was 59 degrees, making it too cold for a midnight swim for the vast majority of people. The night air temperature was 57 degrees, further suggesting it was too cold for anyone to be swimming at midnight. We can reasonably assume that Michelle didn't like the cold, since when last seen at 8 p.m. she was wearing a trench coat. And finally, this explanation doesn't account for the missing leg and the changed bone. A different theory suggests that Michelle fell from Sunset Cliffs. The area is well known to have deteriorating sandstone that have actually led to other deaths in the past. Falling may have caused some of her injuries. An alternate version of this theory proposes that a vehicle forced her off the cliff, but a glaring issue with this is that it would not explain what happened to her leg yet again. Obviously, simply colliding with the cliff wouldn't result in that type of injury. And at this point, probably the theory that you've been thinking of the most, murder. Michelle may have been harmed by someone who either left her to die or drowned her. An expert noted that she would have had to take large breaths to ingest so much sand, suggesting this might have occurred at the shoreline as someone drowned her. To most, the murder theory seems to be the most believable for a number of reasons. Michelle lived in a questionable, drug-infested neighborhood known as the War Zone, making it possible for various incidents to occur, and her body could have been disposed of at the cliffs. The fact that Michelle's body was found naked lacks a reasonable explanation. How could a victim of a shark attack, cliff fall, or accidental drowning end up naked? It doesn't make any sense. Michelle's purse was discovered in the sand around 2.5 miles from her body, in a heavily frequented area. The purse contained keys and money, and it's highly improbable that no one noticed it in 24 hours. It raises the possibility that someone may have killed her and then strategically placed the purse to make it look like an accident. If we are to look at this as a murder case, then there are immediately a number of suspects that police can look into, one of which is named Edwin Decker. Edwin, a co-worker of Michelle's, made some peculiar statements when questioned. He mentioned that Michelle had a quote-unquote hippie vibe and enjoyed surfing naked. However, none of her friends confirmed this, and lifeguards who were familiar with the area didn't recall ever seeing Michelle surf or swim naked. This unusual claim could be a convenient explanation for why her body was found without clothing. Decker went on to say that he and Michelle had gone out together and flirted for weeks. He claimed to feel an emotional and intellectual connection between the two of them. After learning about Michelle's death, he published the following poem. The report said there was a tattoo, a butterfly on her shoulder, which I remember that night, on my couch when I, like the shark, chewed on her hips and took off her shirt. Needless to say, this is a very strange poem. Michelle used to work at a local coffee shop where she faced constant stalking from an unknown man. This unsettling situation led her to leave her job at the shop, with the stalker riding a motorcycle being the only known detail about him. In an attempt to distance herself from the stalker, Michelle took a job at an office supply store. Denise Knox, Michelle's former boss, shared that shortly after Michelle's death, a peculiar man visited the store and made multiple copies of Michelle's autopsy report. Knox added that the man left the store on a motorcycle. This person was never identified. Then in 2019, we get another pretty significant detail about Michelle's life. Michelle's sister, Teresa, who is a major mental health advocate, revealed details about the abuse Michelle endured from a serial pedophile at a Catholic church. He was a priest named Greg Ingalls. The article also explores Michelle's struggle with lifelong addiction and health problems, along with the impact on her and Teresa's family. With this newfound information, many investigators think that Michelle's mental distress may have played a significant role in her death. That's going to end today's video. Apologies for the length of this one, it's obviously way shorter than normal. I am working on a few other projects which have kind of screwed up my workflow for this channel, but we should be good for the following weeks. And now on the screen, you will see the iceberg with every entry that we've covered so far in this iceberg. I was wanting to wait and get this with a link to a site that makes it easier to look at, where all of the entries also have clickable links, but I don't know what I'm doing wrong with it. It just doesn't seem like that's gonna happen. Like, I have the chart, but it's like forever set on private. I've tried to make it unlisted or public, but I don't know, it just won't change. So if you guys see an entry in the chart that you believe should be moved closer to the surface or further down, then make a comment for it below. And if I see enough of the same comments, or if your particular comment seems to be getting good traction, then we'll make the change. And just an FYI, I have been ranking all of these entries based on obscurity. And finally, before I head off, I'd like to thank my wonderful patrons and channel members. Thank you so much to Christian Jorgensen, Greg, 4L60E, Adventure Ted, Coalescent Carnage, Chaz It Up, Cody Grandman, Courtney Von Schriltz, Emma, Flannery Rose, John Thomas, Chaotic Bluebird, Kimberly Nicole, Mars, Maui, Owl Yoop, Saucy Sofa, Schmapton Schmerica, Steve Sharofsky, Aaron the Artistic, Bad Baphomet, Beck Walls, Ben Franchi, Bennett Malillo, Bestial Darkness, Cam Haha, Cherylia Hughes, Chris, Commit Felony Feline, Coy Jones, Coyote Lord, Daniel Lemke, Daniela Salas, Derek Waterbury, David Veltman, Dim Resin, Dip Shizzle, Edwill, Eileen McRudry, Evil Dead Bread, Frostcore Club, Foley, Gary, Giselle Sweet Moncour, Grace, Halo Fan 234, Harley, Harley Deadman, Hide Worry, Jackson W, Jacob Adams, Jacoby Gilbert, J Record 22, Jay Huds, Joseph Mulligan, Joseph Virgin, Josh Falls, Julia Fritzy, Kent, Kiana, King Mog, Lady Fang, Len, Liss Electro, Mad Dog, Main Adam, Marco Espinoza, Martin Surdick, McLover, Me4, Michael Myers, Mijin, Morgan Smith, Nathan Brown, Nathan Flagg, Nick Huber, Night Burton, Nina Brown, Official Dingus, Okami Fan 1 Productions, Pedro Elizondo Jr., Ray Booney, Ray, Roanch, Roto, Sally Bunce, Samili Moody, Sarah Kruder, Sarah Richardson, Shane Whitehead, Shy, Skylar Morris, Sophie Livingstone, Stephanie Price, Stephen Meter, Subtle Spell, Taylor Stone King, The Hidden Eye, Teresa Headlam, Tony Swanevelt, Tyler Gray, Typical Ethan, Victor Chamil, Wilder Than Mild, Zero, Zion Edison, -5 stars, Sasha Wise, Jerome Reuter, Synth Runner, Astrid Yessing, Neve, Mam Shiba 101, Alan Amaro, Blasphemous Baphomet, Randvar, Aphotic Cthulhu, Emma Chacho, Barely Living Dead Girl, Retro Warrior, Psycho Bear, Andrea K, and Tan Vo. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. If any of you guys still watching are interested in becoming a member or a patron, check out the links below. If you become either of them, you do get early access to ad-free videos, and on the Patreon, you get access to exclusive videos, including the TCAP Iceberg, which I should be adding the next part in the next about week or so. So all that being said, Happy New Year's everyone, and I hope you guys all have an amazing week.